This video is to help you understand some vocabulary called the rhetorical situation that we're going to be using throughout the rest of the year, both in English 101 and English 102. Understanding the rhetorical situation is really, really important for you as writers, also for you as readers. So as we progress further on in the semester, we're going to be doing more and more reading so that we can recognize some of these elements coming up in other writers' pieces. And then you can demonstrate that you understand it within your own writing assignments, because the rhetorical situation is hugely important. Any of you that might struggle in the upcoming essays in writing your outlines, generally you're struggling because you have not thought about your rhetorical situation strongly enough. So I'm going to help walk you through what the rhetorical situation is so that when we use this vocabulary throughout the rest of the year, you're going to be confident that you understand what I'm talking about. So when we discuss the rhetorical situation, we really have three basic elements that are super important to this discussion. And those elements are going to involve the following words. Exigence, which is a new one for you. Most of you are not aware of that one. Audience, which you are basically familiar with, and the concept of purpose, which you've heard before, but I'm not sure that you understand it super well. So when we talk about exigence, exigence is basically the motivation of the writer. So what is it deep inside this writer that makes them want to express themselves? So the dictionary definition for exigence would be the urgent need or demand for the writer to communicate. So what is it that's compelling this person to create this text and then share it with other people? And if we analyze the basic motivations of most human beings, they can be organized loosely into three big containers. The first one is purging of emotions. A lot of times when we choose to write, and that choice is our own and not dictated by a school assignment, when we choose to write on our own, a lot of times the reason why we're choosing to write is because we have feelings and we want those feelings to be shared. Sometimes those are very happy, powerful feelings. You are in love. You want to write a love note to your significant other. You are grateful. You want to write a thank you note to the person who just gave you a gift or did something really kind for you. You are angry, so you pick up the phone and you send a text and you tell that person the way you think of them, right? So whether the emotions are positive or negative, oftentimes as writers, that's the motivating reason for us to let loose and communicate. The second thing that we have to pay attention to is the fact that a lot of times people are making money off of the content that they write. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that we need to recognize specifically. Salespeople are trying to make money off of what they're writing. Newspaper writers are paid a salary to write their columns. This does not mean that the thoughts of those newspaper writers should now be ignored because they're making money, but that is part of the context of what we're reading. We know that they're paid to say something. And sometimes they're being paid to say something with a particular political slant involved. So we just have to take that all in when we're readers. We have to think about, is this person trying to get anything out of me? Are they trying to get me to purchase something like a book? Are they trying to get me to purchase a product? And just recognize it. If we're honest about the way that money influences our decisions, then at least we can see its influence then on us. If you think back to your college essay assignments, those of you who picked scholarships are definitely writing to make money. You want that scholarship to pick you so that your life is a little bit easier in college from them giving you $500, $1,000, whatever it is. So you are also motivated to write well in order to make money. You could even argue that your college essays are about making money from the standpoint of you would like to go to that college so that you could then improve your education and hopefully get a good job someday. So sometimes it is all kind of wrapped up in that idea. The third reason why some people write is to benefit their self or benefit other people around them by sharing their thoughts and feelings. So they have a message and they feel like that message is important for the rest of the community for a wide variety of reasons. And a lot of times our motivations, our exigence to write, comes from specific circumstances in our lives. So we're probably purging emotions because something specific happened to us. We fell in love, we got a gift, we saw something that made us angry. Maybe we have been witness to something in society that we want to change. So that event is also part of it. So sometimes it's all wrapped up into one, and sometimes we can pick it apart and say that individual elements are there. But as a reader, you need to be able to recognize what motivates that writer, because it's going to give you a better understanding of the other two elements of the rhetorical situation. If we think back to the one book-length text that we've all read in common, The Coddling of the American Mind, I think there could be a little bit of purging of emotions there. There were some frustrations that the authors had in watching these events unfold on college campuses. We have to admit they made money off of it. It's a book and it's a bestseller, so that's a good thing. We want to have people, earn a living by writing, so that's okay. But definitely they want to benefit themselves and society, because they're trying to stop this trend that they see happening on college campuses by trying to get people to think about the way that their actions are influencing this negativity and polarization. Okay, so we'll move on to the second part of the rhetorical situation, which is the audience themselves. You know that at its core, audience simply means the recipient of the message. But I want you to think in a more sophisticated way about the audience. That's why from here on out, when I have you write an outline for your 101 papers, you are going to be thinking about who you're writing to. That is your primary audience. Your primary audience is the group of people that you're aiming at. You are deliberately thinking about them as you write your paper. This will be very helpful to some of you who are lost on your topics. No matter what mode we're dealing with, if you don't know who you're aiming at, then oftentimes your organization is sort of random, because you don't know your purpose, you don't know your goal, you don't know what you want to do with these people, you don't even know what people you're talking to. Or sometimes it's confusing because you have more than one primary audience, and then as readers we don't know what it is that you want. So your primary audience is the piece that the primary audience is the group of people that the piece is aimed at. Okay? Obviously, we sometimes have other people pick up our writing, maybe unintentional audiences that look at them. So in this case, secondary audiences would be anybody else who might encounter the text. Writers do not necessarily write to influence secondary audiences, but sometimes those secondary audiences will read it and will respond, sometimes in positive ways, sometimes in negative ways. A couple years ago, I used to use in my AP classroom a website that would allow my students to share their personal writing. And those students thought that their writing was only being shared within the AP Lang group. So the primary audience was other fellow AP Lang students, mainly juniors, but definitely like an inside circle group of people. What they forgot, though, was that all other former AP students also had access to these writings, and a former AP student copied it and then spread it out to the rest of the Geneseo community. That, in this case, would have been a secondary audience, because the writer was not intending for her piece, which did happen to be about football. She did not intend for that to go what I'm going to call Geneseo viral. Okay, so the secondary audiences involve anybody else who might encounter the text at that time period, but also any time in the future. If you think about some of these historical documents that you read, oftentimes in textbooks, you are not the primary audience of that piece. And sometimes as readers, that makes it harder for you because you don't understand the allusions, you don't understand the time period, the evidence. This does not mean that those pieces of writing are stupid, which I sometimes hear frustrated readers say out loud. This is the dumbest thing I've ever read. My response to you is, if you feel like something is dumb, that's a glaring red blinking light saying you're not in the primary audience. And if you're a secondary audience member, you might have to work harder to understand what it is that that writer's trying to say, because it's not aimed at you. It's aimed at somebody else. So kind of keep that in mind. There's a couple other ways that we can think about audience as well. When you have speeches that are given, then you have an immediate audience, which is a direct recipient of that message. And in today's world, like, with even what I'm doing right now, this video recording, you are my immediate audience because you're listening to it, but you're not immediate in the sense that you're not in front of me right now in my classroom, unfortunately, being able to listen to it. So generally when we're talking about immediacy, we're talking about like people who are witnessing a public speaker. And their experience of witnessing the public speaker is going to be very different than perhaps a mediated audience that is maybe witnessing the same event, but they're witnessing it through a medium, which means they might be watching it in a video recording the same way that you are watching me right now, or maybe it came up in a news piece, maybe they read something in a blog. The thing that we have to remember about mediated audiences is that the medium does influence the message. So even the way that I'm presenting these lecture notes right now are very different than the way I would present lecture notes if you were in front of me in the classroom. If you were in front of me in the classroom, I would stop and I would talk to you and I would engage you, trying to make sure that you understood. Here, I'm just sort of letting the information go and hoping that you, as my mediated audience, can ask me questions later if you have them, or you could stop and rewind and re-listen to something again, which is something that medium allows you to do. Okay, so most of all, what's important is that you recognize who your audience is when you are the writer, and that if you are reading something and it's difficult, keep in mind that that just simply means you are probably not the primary audience, so you need to figure out who the primary audience is so that you can understand that piece from their perspective. Okay, the third element of the rhetorical situation is going to be purpose. Purpose boils down to this question: what do you want the audience to do? Okay, what do you want the audience to do? So this is always going to be an action. When we're talking about purpose, we are always talking about actions. Purpose is different than main idea. So yes, your essays are going to have a main idea, but the main idea is the content. The purpose is the goal. So what do you want your audience to get up and do after they read your piece? What do you want? Do you want them to buy something? Do you want them to get up off their couch and go vote? Do you want them to write a letter to their politicians? Do you want them to share their concerns with somebody in the school district? What is your purpose? Do you want them to change their coaching styles? Do you want them to vacation in a certain spot? So ultimately, it boils down to an action. At the very least, most writers want the audience to share their exigence, meaning if I'm angry, right, if I'm trying to purge those emotions because I'm angry, I want you to be angry too. Or if I'm excited about this product and I want to buy this product, I want you to buy this product too. So at the very least, most of the time, you're trying to get them to share that same motivation or feeling that you have. But you should always, always, always describe purpose with a strong verb. So keep that in mind. When I ask you about purpose on the outline, make sure that that's not the same thing as what you're placing in your thesis statement area, because your thesis statement is the main idea, but your purpose is what do you want them to do once they have this idea in their head. So the last part of the notes just reminds you of things from the perspective of both a reader and a writer. So this is what I want you to think about when you are the reader. Rhetoric is always situational, and we're going to use the term rhetoric to define the things that we read and write, okay? So that communication, the communication of words is always situational. And when we talk about something being situational, that means that it changes over time, right? The situation is constantly changing. So every situation has a context, meaning a time and a place, and every situation has a purpose. And if you are going to understand a piece of college level reading material correctly, you've got to know what the situation is. You've got to recognize the historical and political context of it. And you've got to understand the purpose of the piece and who that piece is being aimed at. E is more about you and what you should think about when you're the writer. When you are the writer, especially when it's not something that's assigned, okay? When it's something outside of class where you finally as an adult make a decision that you are going to communicate, your motivation, your exigence is going to prompt your choices. So whatever it is that motivates you is going to get you to think about the genre that you should use. And then once you've decided on your genre, then you're going to start making a lot of other choices that are going to be defined by your audience and your purpose. So you're going to choose the words that you use because you know that they are going to influence your audience. You are going to structure your thoughts in a way that's going to motivate your audience to complete whatever purpose it is that you want to accomplish. At this point, when I lecture, I usually give an example from my life that was a real life writing situation. So you can kind of see what I mean by exigence prompts genre. So I'm going to share a little bit of personal details with you right now. When I was your age, I was in a position and had known that I was in this position for a long time, that I was going to be the valedictorian of our class. And in our school, we were still under the system that valedictorians gave a speech. So I had been looking forward to giving a speech to my community for years. Like I was the top student in class. I was going to give this speech. I had not written my speech yet, and it was like Tuesday or Wednesday of the week before we graduated, and we had our senior awards night. And at our senior awards night, I ended up taking home quite a few awards, to the point where I was starting to feel almost a little bit embarrassed inside. It was myself and this other ag kid who kept winning a bunch of FFA scholarships. Our names just kept getting called up to the stage. And even though I'd known these people since I was in kindergarten, you never know what their reaction is going to be when you are winning all of the trophies and the awards. At the end of that night, the final award was the valedictorian medal. And when I got that, everybody stood up and gave me a standing ovation. And it really made me feel emotional. I've just felt very loved from my classmates. Now, granted, I graduated with 50 people, so it's a much smaller school than what you have here in Geneseo. I knew that I wanted to tell them how I felt about them, but I also knew that I could not stand up on graduation day 4 or 5 days later and say these things because I knew that I would cry. In fact, I learned later that my classmates were taking bets on how quickly in my speech I would cry. The answer to that, by the way, is I didn't cry until the very end, and so I think some people lost money. But I wanted to tell them how I felt, and so I made a decision. I said one thing in my speech, and then I wrote them a personal letter. I'm going to go like this, personal letter, because it was basically a form letter that I made 50 copies of, and then I put all of their names. I put each copy into an envelope, put their name on it, so I made sure that I gave it to every single person in my class. And then in the time period before we had to process in and do the ceremony, I handed it out and gave them all this letter. And in the letter, I actually got to say what I wanted to say. So my feelings of love for my classmates prompted me to pick the form of the personal letter. And then I made sure that I actually got to share what I wanted to share with them because I knew who my audience was. I knew my purpose was to share my feelings. And so I did a really good job. I was super proud that they cried. A lot of their parents read the letter before the graduation ceremony, and they cried, which was awesome because I loved their parents too. So you can see how when you have a real life writing situation, what motivates you then helps you focus in on your audience, and if you understand your purpose, you're going to make wiser choices on how to reach that audience.